Hello everyone, I'm delighted to welcome you to this new video. I'm François Bartomeuf and I'm an astrologer. I offer consultations on my website for individuals and professionals. I also offer an online course for students, no matter your level. If you want to make great progress in astrology and learn a method for interpreting birth charts, you can visit my website, available in both French and English, to find out more about all of this. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about Nicolas Sarkozy's birth chart, since it's a current topic. Indeed, Nicolas Sarkozy, former French president from 2007 to 2012, has just been sentenced to 5 years in prison without parole for criminal association. That's the official term. In the Libyan affair, basically, he is accused of having accepted money from Muammar Gaddafi, that is from Libya, to finance his 2007 election campaign, which is illegal. And so for that, he has been sentenced to 5 years in prison without parole. So Henri Guénaud, who is one of Nicolas Sarkozy's former close advisors, just pointed out on a TV show that in fact there have only been 2 previous cases, 2 French leaders who have been sentenced to actual prison time. The first was Louis XV, who was sentenced to the Temple prison in 1792. So there you have it, that goes way back. And the second was Philippe Pétain, who at the end of the Second World War was accused and also imprisoned. In his case, it was for life at the Ile-Dieu prison for high treason. So, well, the third one. The third French president or leader who is sentenced, not just faces, but is actually sentenced to prison, well, that's Nicolas Sarkozy. So as I'm recording this video, I'm recording it on October 1st, 2025. The only information I have about what happens next is that he has been summoned on October 13th by the National Financial Prosecutor's Office. And at that point, well, he could indeed be incarcerated, either immediately or a bit later, at the Saint prison to serve his sentence. That's what I know. I suggest we take a look at Nicolas Sarkozy's chart, see the birth placements in his natal chart, and then look at the transits he can expect in the coming weeks and months. Are you ready? All right, let's go. I'll show you everything. Okay, don't be afraid, I have a way of explaining things because, well, I know this looks like a lot, you see, and for those who aren't familiar with astrology, it might seem intimidating. But don't worry, I have a way of explaining that will help you understand complex things in a simple way, and you'll understand everything. So don't worry. Okay, so here you have Nicolas Sarkozy's birth chart. The first ring here shows the positions of his planets at the time of his birth. And the second ring of planets here in green shows the current positions of the planets in the sky as of October 1st, 2025. So let's first look at what's in his natal chart. So Nicolas Sarkozy is an Aquarius. Why is that? Because as you can see, his sun is in the sign of Aquarius. And he's also a Virgo rising because the ascendant was rising in the sign of Virgo at the time of his birth. So since he's Virgo rising, he's also influenced by Mercury. There you go. Why? Because Mercury is the planet of Virgo. That's it. So he's a Mercurian. If you don't know this, I invite you to use this little card game that I developed especially to help you with astrology. These are the astrological dominoes, which will allow you to practice with charts to know which planet rules which chart, which sign of the zodiac, so the astrological dominoes. So Mercury is the ruling planet of the sign of Virgo. So Nicolas Sarkozy is a Mercurian, and he is a Mercurian of the sign Aquarius. So he's a Mercurian of Aquarius because, as you can see, Mercury here is in the sign of Aquarius. So he's a Mercurian of Aquarius. What does that suggest? It suggests everything related to gifts in the area. Oratory skills. You see? So gifts for expressing oneself orally, in particular, not only, but especially verbally. Aquarius is an air sign, so a sign of communication. And Mercury is the planet of communication. So here we have gifts for communication. A form of communication here that aims to be modern. You have to take risks. In 2007, Nicolas Sarkozy was seen as the new French Kennedy because he embodied a kind of innovation within the French political class, as well as a certain freedom, especially in his speech. And he also had progressive modern ideas, some of which he implemented at that time. Okay, so a mercurial Aquarius. So when we look at Mercury, you can see that Mercury, precisely for his gifts as an orator, and you can also see that he has this Moon-Mars conjunction in his 7th house. So the 7th house is the house of interactions with others, it's the house of relationships and exchanges with others. And here you have Mars, who is the fighter. Here the Moon, which can represent, for example, an audience. So here we really have a conjunction that enables persuasion. To persuade is a Martian action, and to persuade an audience. The Moon, which represents an audience, a mass, a crowd. So here we really have oratory gifts thanks to Mercury in Aquarius. And these oratory gifts allow in debates. Debates are moments when you have to fight verbally to persuade a crowd. And that's really what stands out in Nicolas Sarkozy's personality. That is to say, when you listen to him, you are hypnotized, you are captivated by Nicolas Sarkozy's charisma and his ability to convince an audience. That's what made him strong, but also his weakness. Because afterwards you have to keep your promises, you have to do what you say. And that's another matter. Okay? And then we can also see that the 7th house is the traditional house of Libra. It's the house of legal matters. And here we see a struggle related to the Moon, which for a politician can represent his reputation. The Moon is a politician's reputation. So here, one might fight legally for their reputation, for their integrity, for example. So that's Mars conjunct the Moon. Okay, good. And then you see, if I now go back to Mercury, Mercury is making difficult aspects. That is to say, you see there is an opposition from Mercury to Pluto here. So this is like a birthmark, I like to say that. It's in his DNA, if you will, something that predisposes him to experience a Plutonian crisis at some point. A Plutonian crisis, you know that Pluto is the planet of Scorpio, and Pluto comes to take many things away from us. It comes to strip us of certain things and thus provoke a crisis. It actually comes to make us fall. So here you see that at some point these gifts as an orator will be confronted with something quite difficult by Pluto, which will come to bring him down and take away what he had. So comfort, security, reputation, a whole set of things. And then you also have a square, you see here this square to this Saturn Black Moon conjunction. So the Black Moon represents the karmic trial. It's often the karmic trial during one's life. And Saturn here, you know that Saturn is the planet of Capricorn, so Saturn represents many things, but it essentially represents the principle of restriction. So when you have an aspect of a square to Saturn, it's particularly strong because Saturn comes to reduce something. It comes to block something. Well, what does Saturn come to block here? It comes to block, it comes to limit the expression of Mercury. Mercury, as we've seen, is speech. The free speech of Nicolas Sarkozy apparently, but also movement. Mercury is also movement. Gemini's Mercury is I move. So here, Saturn at some point comes to limit not only expression, but also the natural movement of Mercury in Aquarius. So symbolically, for example, in a personal chart, in the consultations I do regularly, when you have something like Saturn square Mercury in a natal chart, you can think of certain periods of immobility in life, because Saturn comes to restrict movement. And then you can also think of a restriction of speech. At certain times, you can no longer speak, you can no longer express yourself. Either because you are alone or because you have a problem, you lose your voice, whatever the reason may be. Something comes to prevent speech. But here in Nicolas Sarkozy's chart, it's more serious. Why? Because it's conjunct with the Black Moon. And the Black Moon represents a karmic trial during one's life. So it's something much more significant here. The Saturnian restriction will at some point bring about a karmic trial in his life by restricting his speech and his movement. Now you should also know that Saturn has a legal dimension, like Jupiter. In fact, Jupiter, which you see here, and Saturn are two planets that are connected to everything legal. But there is a distinction in astrology. Jupiter is more about legal matters, the legal system, whereas Saturn represents the law itself. So if you will, Jupiter is more representative of lawyers, while Saturn is more representative of judges. So here we can also think of a Saturnian legal authority, in this case a judge, who at some point will restrict or prevent the movement and speech of Nicolas Sarkozy, thereby causing a karmic trial in his life. A karmic trial that was already indicated by Mercury opposite Pluto. You see? So there would be a lot more to say. The study of a birth chart is endless, it's infinite, it's so rich. But I just wanted to show you this, the birth markers that Nicolas Sarkozy had in his natal chart. Now, I'm going to show you what's currently happening in the sky for Nicolas Sarkozy. Are you ready? All right, let's take a look. You have Saturn. You see, this is Saturn's current position in the sky in October 2025. So it's here. It's at the end of the sign of Pisces. And you can see that it's actually passing over his descendant here. So you know that this seventh house, and especially the descendant, represents legal matters. So here, symbolically, you have the judge. The judge that we had here in his birth chart, the judge who passes by, who comes to face him. So the ascendant is us, and then opposite us, the person facing us is the descendant. So at Nicolas Sarkozy's descendant, we have the Saturnian judge who is currently present. And so already here you have the notion of judgment. Saturn in opposition is a judgment. It is the judge who gives his verdict. So that's exactly what we see. And you see that at the same time, this Saturn here, I'm going to make a point, it forms a square here in its midheaven. And it also forms a square here at its background of the sky. You see? All right? So there is a double square. Now the midheaven for all of us truly represents our socio-professional life, our career path, and our public image. Well, for Nicolas Sarkozy, his entire socio-professional life, his public standing and his career trajectory are indeed very important and hold significant weight. It's his role as president. He's still called Mr. President. All right? So it's really his career here. So Saturn here is causing a problem, is to reduce, to restrict, to oppose his career. And at the same time, it opposes the background of the sky. And the background of the sky is his private life. So it's his place of residence, his lifestyle. We can imagine Nicolas Sarkozy, if you like, he's not homeless. All right? So he must live in a beautiful house. He must have a comfortable lifestyle with offices. He still has expenses that are, of course, paid for by the Republic for life. So even though he has had a lot of legal troubles for years, his daily life is still comfortable. Well, here, Saturn also creates a problem for this comfortable daily life. In fact, it creates a double problem for both his career and his daily life. So here we have the end of his political career, I would say, and at the same time, finally, a judgment that alters his political career and takes away his comfortable lifestyle. So basically, this is the trial in prison here. So you see how Saturn is acting in his birth chart. It's really characteristic. So this Saturn transit over the descendant will last until the end of December, early January. So in my opinion, if you will, Nicolas Sarkozy, so he will be summoned to the National Financial Prosecutor's Office on October 13th. And in my opinion, given this transit, the National Financial Prosecutor's Office will confirm the incarceration of Nicolas Sarkozy. And this incarceration should last, we'll come back to this, but until the end of December, early January. So what does incarceration mean? It means he's going to La Santé prison. That's going to be very tough. I can't even imagine. Well, what I do know is that it's a prison, it's a cell that's 8.75 square meters. So it's really small with a shower, a bed that's 70 centimeters wide, so it's nothing like the comfort he's used to now. It's going to be a real shock for him, I can imagine. How can I put it? You can't adjust the temperature of the shower. If you want a TV, you have to pay for it. If you want a fridge, you have to pay for it. You see? Well, it's really rough. And in my opinion, given this transfer, he's going to stay in this prison hospital. He should stay there until the end of December or early January. So why might he be able to get out of this prison afterwards? I'll explain why. Because actually, starting from January, between January and April, well, he doesn't have any more transits. So that's the end of Saturn's transit. And after that, there are no more transits in Nicolas Sarkozy's chart. And that leads me to think that there will indeed be an adjustment to his sentence, but not right away. An adjustment to his sentence that should take place between January and April. And on what basis? Well, on the basis that he will most likely have been thoroughly assessed and evaluated by the prison administration, specifically between the months of October and December, it is expected. And it is at that point that the prison administration will be able to say, yes, okay, we agree to a sentence adjustment. Since Nicolas Sarkozy is over 70 years old, he is 70 years and 8 months old as I speak to you, he could indeed be eligible for a sentence adjustment. And in principle, that seems to be confirmed by these developments. So what does a sentence adjustment mean? It means an electronic bracelet. It means returning home with the inability to go out except for exceptional reasons for work, provided that everything is declared, appointments are made, he is supervised, monitored, and must regularly check in at the police station. There is a perimeter, he cannot leave it. So as you can see, it's very restrictive. It's actually imprisonment at home, in fact, at his residence. And so that could last until April, since I then see other transits coming into his astrological chart starting in April. So from April on, that's probably when he'll file an appeal, or maybe he'll appeal before, but that's when his appeal trial will likely be held. Now I see a lot of transits coming in after that, whereas there was nothing between January and April. In April, things start happening. So what happens in April? In April, Saturn, as you can see, will continue its path. And so it will pass over this Mars-Moon conjunction. So we've seen what this Mars-Moon conjunction means. It was a battle for his reputation, the Moon, a Martian struggle for his lunar reputation in the 7th house, which is the house of legal matters. And Saturn will pass through here. So we can clearly see that the Saturnian judge will once again trigger something here in conjunction with the Moon and Mars. So we can expect in April a new battle for Nicolas Sarkozy in this appeal trial. So that's very clear. It's going to be quite intense. Why? Because when Saturn passes over Mars-Moon, you can also see that it will form a sextile, this blue aspect here, to the Sun. So I think he'll be quite strong at that moment, even if he will have been deeply wounded by his incarceration until December. But at that point, he will be strong again to take on this Mars-Moon battle, so during the month of April. And then what happens next? There's a new milestone coming up in his chart, starting from August 2026. August 2026? What happens in August 2026? Well, look, here it's Jupiter. You know we've talked about Jupiter before. It represented justice. Well, Jupiter will also continue its path and will come here to 8 degrees Leo. So Jupiter here, and at 8 degrees Leo, it will oppose his Sun. So it will oppose his Sun, but it will also form a trine with the Moon. So you'll have that as well. Wait, let me erase a bit. There we go. What's going to happen is that there will be a trine to the Moon here. There you go. And an opposition to the Sun. So at that moment, in August, we can see that justice will likely deliver a new verdict. So that would be the end of his appeal trial. So the conclusion of the appeal trial proceedings, if you will. It's not yet, no, I said the verdict, but no, it's not the verdict yet. It's the end of the appeal trial, which could take place in August 2026. Concretely, well, there are both positives and negatives. I think that in the end, we'll still have some hope with Jupiter trine Moon for a sentence adjustment. But the justice system really won't go entirely in Nicolas Sarkozy's favor. So it will certainly also leave open the possibility of a confirmation, if not an increase, of his sentence. Maybe other cases could also be brought up again, along with additional information to increase the sentence. What I see here in August is that it's going to be mixed. It's not Nicolas Sarkozy who will win against the justice system. I think it's the justice system that will remain very firm, very strong, and will leave some doubt hanging. So that's for August. Now, why are we talking about August? Because it's the month of August. So Jupiter in Leo opposed to the Sun, and then there's a doubt. Okay, well, the deliberation, that is once this is the end of the trial in August, we let the summer pass. You know that in summer, the entire justice system takes a break. They've worked so hard, they're so understaffed that during the summer in France, nothing happens. The files are put aside for later, for autumn, in September, etc. So the verdict of this appeal trial should come a bit later, when Jupiter continues its path and passes over Pluto, here as you can see. And that will take place in October-November. So that's October-November 2026. There you go. So we should have the verdict from the court in October-November 2026 regarding this appeal trial. I apologize, it's all a bit complicated. These are technical legal terms. I'm not completely familiar with all of this myself. I'm trying to explain to you as simply as possible what is likely to happen. According to the transits in October-November 2026, there should be the verdict of Nicolas Sarkozy's appeal trial. So what can we expect here? Well, it's not very good. It's not very good. First, because you can see that Jupiter will intensify Pluto, which was already in opposition to Mercury. So, this crisis. So I think this will rather go in the direction of confirmation of a sentence, of a prison sentence without suspension. Why is it Jupiter conjunct Pluto opposite Mercury? Alright, but also you can clearly observe that at that precise moment, the expansive planet Jupiter will not only be in a harmonious trine aspect with the benevolent planet Venus, but it will also form a supportive sextile aspect with the midheaven, which represents one's public image and career path. There you go, sextile here and trine here. And that's better. Is that enough to counterbalance Pluto opposite Mercury? No. But it's still an improvement. So what I can say is that the verdict in October-November 2026 should be generally negative. Now, negative is subjective, meaning it's as perceived by Nicolas Sarkozy. I think he will fight during his appeal trial with the hope of having his prison sentence overturned. That is to say, right now he has been sentenced to 5 years. In April, he should be fighting. That should be during the appeal trial, which should wrap up in August. And at the end of August, he should be thinking, I hope my appeal trial will allow my sentence to be overturned and therefore my incarceration, and so set me free. But in reality, well, most likely not. That is, the court should confirm his prison sentence. However, since there are some positive aspects, certainly with Venus, the second ruler of the 7th house, but especially in sextile to his midheaven, I think he should nevertheless benefit from a sentence adjustment. A sentence reduction, to be more precise. Now, I don't know, I can't quantify that. Will he go from 5 years to 2 years of incarceration? Will he go from 5 years to 3 years? I don't know. But it's something like that, most likely. So for him, for Nicolas Sarkozy, it's going to be a disappointment. Because he really thought, he truly hoped, I think, to have his sentence overturned. And in the end, your sentence will still be upheld, but with a reduction in the length of incarceration. So the maintenance of an adjustment, meaning he should remain at home with an electronic bracelet, and he should go from 5 years to 3 years. Afterwards, with sentence adjustments, even if you have 3 years of house arrest with adjustments, in the end, you get sentence reductions. And maybe you end up serving only 1.5 years or 2 years. But what I mean is that here, around October-November 2026, there should be a confirmation and at the same time a reduction. So I don't know, 2 years, 3 years, something like that. That seems to me the most likely scenario given the transits in Nicolas Sarkozy's chart for what's coming next. We have to fully realize that what is about to happen is still a significant trauma that we must understand. It's hard to imagine the psychological trauma of incarceration when you've been president of the Republic, when you live comfortably, and then suddenly you find yourself practically imprisoned at Santé prison with your image completely tarnished. That must be extremely, extremely hard, and the body is going to absorb all of that. And you absolutely have to be very careful, because what is coming next, you see here, is indeed Pluto's significant transit over Nicolas Sarkozy's natal sun, and that particular event happens in the year 2028, that's precisely it. So, in the year 2028, he will really need to meticulously keep a very close eye on this significant Pluto transit over his sun because, well, that could potentially bring about serious health problems that deeply stem from the profound traumas he has experienced. These are deep-seated traumas experienced during this challenging and difficult period of incarceration, specifically between the years 2025 and 2026. There are many examples in history of people who have gone through this. For instance, I'm thinking of Bernard Tapie, the prominent financier and former French minister who had a lot of trouble with the law and later developed serious health problems, which ultimately led to his death. So this doesn't necessarily mean the same will happen to Nicolas Sarkozy, but the transit of Pluto over his sun in 2028 is definitely something he should anticipate and watch very closely. At that point, he'll need to have regular health checkups because his psyche will have been truly wounded, and as a result, he could develop a whole range of related symptoms. That's what I wanted to say. Well, it's not very cheerful once again, but I think it's always better for him to be prepared. And for us as well, it's good to have some idea of what might happen next in this legal case involving the former president of the Republic. That's what I wanted to show you in this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting. Feel free to check out my websites, both in French and English, to see the different consultations I offer, as well as the courses if you're interested in astrology. I would be extremely happy to welcome you to my online course. See you very soon for another video. Thank you very much for your attention. Goodbye.